Chapter 1. The Puppeteer returns. Morning air was sharp with the scent of rain-soaked pavements and something far more sinister. The metallic trace of fear. Detective Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the cordoned-off playground, his jaw tight, as he surveyed the scene before him. The nursery school, usually a haven of childhood laughter, now stood cloaked in eerie silence. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, a barrier between innocence and horror. He stepped into the building, the creak of the door echoing through the hallway like a warning. The walls were lined with finger-painted rainbows and construction paper sunflowers, but inside classroom 3B, the world had shifted. Tiny chairs were perfectly arranged in a semicircle. Toys were laid out like an audience, facing a child-sized mannequin slumped over a desk, dressed in a school uniform and missing its face. In chalk above the blackboard, one message stood out in shaky cursive: "The next lesson is hers." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The handwriting was identical to the one left 3 years ago, the last time the Puppeteer had struck. A wave of nausea rolled through him, not from fear, but from the memories clawing their way back to the surface. He crouched to examine the scene, his gloved fingers brushing over a stuffed rabbit placed neatly in the corner, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. No fingerprints, no sign of forced entry. Just like before, the Puppeteer never left evidence, only messages that taunted, teased, and ultimately led to another body. Captain Ruiz entered quietly behind him. "You all right?" he asked. Ethan stood, eyes still fixed on the chalkboard. "It's him," he said flatly. Ruiz sighed. "I hoped we'd buried this monster." Ethan shook his head. "He's never been gone. Just waiting, watching." Ruiz handed him a folder. "There's a name connected to this place, or Lila Hart. Teaches the preschool class. She was the one who opened the room this morning." Ethan flipped open the file, his gaze landing on a photo of a young woman with soft eyes and a quiet smile. There was something about her expression, open yet wary, that tugged at something long buried inside him. "She's not a suspect," Ruiz said quickly, "but she might be the next victim." Ethan closed the folder and nodded. "Then I need to talk to her. Today." As he stepped out of the room, the last thing he saw was the writing on the board. "The next lesson is hers." He didn't know who Lila Hart was, not yet. But if the Puppeteer had marked her, Ethan would find him first. He had to. Chapter 2. Lila's gentle world. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows of little Acorn's nursery, casting a golden warmth over shelves of picture books and rows of watercolor paintings hung with care. In the heart of it all, Lila Hart moved quietly among her students, her soft voice guiding a game of alphabet cards, while little fingers clumsily matched letters with animal names. She was the kind of woman who made chaos feel calm. Children clung to her skirts, their trust as natural as breathing. With every laugh she coaxed, every tear she gently wiped away, Lila stitched herself deeper into the rhythm of their small world. Here, in her classroom, life felt safe, predictable, whole. But that illusion shattered the moment she entered classroom 3B that morning. She hadn't expected anything unusual. She'd brought her coffee, humming a soft lullaby under her breath as she turned the key. The door creaked open, and then silence. Her breath caught. It was the smell first, something sterile and off, mixed with the faint sweetness of chalk dust. Then the cold, a chill that settled deep in her bones as her eyes scanned the room. The chairs were wrong, the toys were too neatly placed, and there, across the blackboard, written in precise, almost childlike script, "The next lesson is hers." Lila's coffee slipped from her hand, the mug shattering against the tile. She didn't scream, didn't run. She simply froze, every muscle locked in a memory she couldn't fully place. A darkness she thought she'd outgrown. It was the mannequin that made her move, a child-sized figure in a school uniform, head bowed and naturally forward, slumped at one of the desks like a child pretending to nap. But it wasn't a child. She stumbled back into the hallway, chest heaving, hands shaking as she dialed 911. Now, hours later, the classroom was sealed off, swarming with police officers and detectives with hard eyes and clipped words. Lila sat on the edge of a bench in the school's front office, wrapped in a grey blanket someone had draped over her shoulders. Her fingers curled around a paper cup of tea she hadn't touched. "Miss Hart," a voice asked gently. She looked up into the eyes of a young officer, who offered her a tight, sympathetic smile. "Detective Cole will be here soon. He's the lead investigator on this case." Lila nodded wordlessly, but her mind was far away, retracing steps she hadn't taken in years, trying to understand why that message felt familiar, why the name the puppeteer made her skin crawl, and most of all, wondering what it meant. The next lesson is hers. What lesson? And why her? Chapter 3. The first meeting. Lila opened the front door slowly, her fingers trembling against the cool brass handle. The officer who had brought her home gave a nod, then stepped aside as a tall man approached, lean, composed, and utterly unreadable. His presence filled the entryway like a gust of cold wind. "Detective 𝐸𝐵, he said, flashing his badge. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Lila Hart," she replied softly, pulling the blanket tighter around her. She tried to steady her voice, but her nerves betrayed her. The events of the morning clung to her like smoke. Ethan stepped inside, surveying the modest house with quick, practiced eyes. It was warm and lived in. Shelves lined with picture books and knitted throws. The faint smell of lavender still hanging in the air. A woman who found comfort in order, softness. They sat across from each other in the small living room, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. Ethan opened his notebook. "You said you entered the classroom at 7:45 a.m. "Yes," Lila nodded, voice quiet. "Like I always do." The lights were off, but the door was unlocked. "Did anything seem out of place before you turned on the lights?" She hesitated. "It was too quiet. I don't know. It's hard to explain. And then I saw it, the message on the board, and that thing sitting at the desk." Ethan's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "Have you ever received threats before? Any incidents in your past that made you feel unsafe?" Lila paused, eyes flickering away. "No, not recently." "Recently," he repeated, catching the hesitation. She shook her head. "It's nothing, just old memories. I don't know if they mean anything." Ethan made a note, but didn't push. Not yet. He watched her closely, noting the way she folded her hands tightly in her lap, how her gaze flicked toward the window as though expecting something, or someone, to be watching. She was scared, yes, but not broken. There was a strength to her, something quiet but unyielding. "Miss Hart, I need you to understand something," he said carefully. "This message, it's not a prank. This isn't random. The man we believe left it is responsible for at least 4 murders. He's methodical, intelligent, and he doesn't stop until he gets what he wants." Lila paled. "So, he's coming for me." Ethan didn't sugarcoat it. "It's a possibility, which means you'll need protection. We'll move you somewhere safe until we know more." Lila's voice faltered. "I can't just leave my students. They'll be frightened. They need stability. And you need to stay alive," Ethan said bluntly. Their eyes met, hers full of quiet protest, his filled with a hardened kind of worrying. There was no softness in his words, but something about the way he said them made her believe he cared about more than just the case. "I'll pack a bag," she said finally. Her voice steadied as she rose and disappeared into the bedroom. Ethan stood in the quiet of her living room, scanning the delicate photos of Lila with her class, children clinging to her legs, arms wrapped around her neck, smiles wide and trusting. He exhaled slowly. Whoever the puppeteer was, he had chosen his next victim carefully. But Ethan Cole had failed before, and this time, he didn't intend to make the same mistake. Chapter 4. Protective custodied safe house was tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac on the outskirts of the city. A modest, 2-bedroom brick home with neutral walls and locked windows. To anyone passing by, it looked like just another family home, maybe one where a child's bike would be left on the lawn. But inside, it felt like a waiting room between danger and safety, silent, still, uneasy. Lila sat stiffly on the living room sofa, her small suitcase by her feet and a cup of untouched tea growing cold in her hands. The weight of unfamiliar surroundings pressed down on her. Everything in this house was too perfect. Pristine surfaces, symmetrical furniture, no clutter, no warmth. A place designed for protection, not comfort. Ethan moved through the space with clinical precision, checking locks, testing the security cameras outside, double-checking the alarm system. Lila watched him quietly, her eyes tracing the hard lines of his jaw. The way his shoulders carried tension molded armor. He hadn't said much since they arrived, just instructions, clipped and clear. "You don't have to patrol like I'm a prisoner," she murmured. He glanced at her, surprised. "You're not." She set the cup down and folded her arms. "Then talk to me like I'm not, please." Ethan hesitated, then lowered himself into the armchair across from her. "This is how I work, Ms. Hart. I focus on facts, emotions, cloud judgment. Well, I teach 4-year-olds. I think emotions are the facts," she said, the trace of a smile on her lips. "They're scared or happy or tired. And that's the truth of their world." His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I'm not used to being challenged by someone who keeps finger paint in her purse. Maybe that's why you need it." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't sharp anymore. There was a softness beginning to creep in. Not comfort, not yet, but something close to understanding. Lila looked around the sterile space and sighed. "Do you ever get used to being hunted?" Ethan looked at her then, really looked. "No," he said quietly. "But you learn how to keep moving anyway." She nodded, her eyes distant. "I can't help thinking about the kids. I didn't even get to say goodbye." "We'll catch him before he gets close again," Ethan said, his voice low and certain. "That's a promise." The conviction in his tone surprised her. For the first time since the message on the board, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared hold on to. Safety. He stood. "There's a bedroom down the hall. I'll be sleeping on the couch. If you need anything, wake me." "Thanks," she said softly, rising to Dot as she disappeared down the hallway. Ethan sat back down in the armchair and exhaled. This wasn't just another witness, not just another case. There was something different about her. Something that made the cold walls he'd built over the years shift, just slightly dot and for the first time in a long time. That scared him more than the killer they were chasing. Chapter 5. Late night Wall's house was quiet, too quiet for sleep. Outside, the wind rustled through bare branches, and every creak of the settling floorboards felt like a warning. Lila sat curled up on the edge of the sofa, a thick blanket around her shoulders, and a book unopened in her lap. Her eyes weren't on the pages. They were fixed on the shadows just beyond the windows. She hadn't turned off the living room lamp. Darkness, even in this so-called safe house, still felt too close. From the kitchen, the low sound of running water and clinking glass caught her attention. She rose, barefoot and silent, and stepped cautiously into the doorway. There was Ethan, standing at the sink, rinsing a mug. His hair was slightly tousled, his grey t-shirt clinging to the quiet strength of his frame. He didn't notice her at first. "I didn't mean to startle you," she said softly. He turned, surprised, then nodded. "Couldn't sleep." She shook her head. "You." He gave a small shrug. "I don't sleep much anymore." Lila stepped further in, leaning against the edge of the counter. "Is it because of him?" Ethan looked down at the mug in his hands, silent for a beat too long. "Partly," he said. "Mostly. It's the things I didn't stop, the people I couldn't save." There was no bravado in his tone, no defense, just a quiet admission. It softened something in her. "You've seen a lot," she murmured. He gave a short laugh, hollow around the edges. "More than I wanted to, less than I should have. I used to think if I worked hard enough, stayed sharp enough, I could fix it all. I was wrong." Lila reached for the tea kettle and began to make the cups. "You don't have to carry it alone." He leaned back against the counter, studying her. "And you? What keeps you awake?" Her fingers paused at the tea bag. "I used to have nightmares as a kid. Bad ones. About being taken. I never knew why. Just this fear I couldn't name. When I saw that message on the board, it felt like something I'd dreamed before. Like it had been waiting. Ethan's brows furrowed. You think you were targeted for a reason? I don't know, she whispered. But I haven't felt safe since I was a child. And now I wonder if that was more than just a feeling. He took the mug she offered, their fingers brushing for a moment, brief, but enough. The air between them shifted. Not romantic, not yet, but human, intimate. You're stronger than you realize, Ethan said quietly. So are you, she replied. They sat together at the kitchen table. Two night owls bound by fear and fragments of pasts they couldn't piece together. The silence that settled now wasn't awkward. It was comforting, warm. He didn't ask her to go back to bed. She didn't suggest he leave her alone. For a while, they just sat, sipping tea, letting the quiet hold them both. And for the first time in days, Lila didn't feel alone. Chapter 6. A walk in the rain. The sky had been threatening rain all afternoon. Thick grey clouds rolling over the city like slow, brooding waves. Lila had been restless all morning, pacing the living room, flipping through books she couldn't focus on, trying not to let the shadows in her mind grow too loud. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. You need air, he said, standing by the door with his jacket slung over one shoulder. Come on, we'll keep to quiet streets. Just a short walk. She hesitated, glancing toward the windows as droplets began to scatter across the glass. It's about to rain. He gave her a rare, almost smile. Then bring an umbrella. They stepped out into the soft drizzle, the world muted and silver-washed. The sidewalks glistened, empty of traffic and noise, as though the city had paused to take a breath. Lila walked beside Ethan in silence at first, their footsteps soft on the damp pavement. You always is quiet on walks? She asked after a while. I'm usually walking crime scenes, he replied. She glanced at him. That's bleak, he shrugged. It's the job. Maybe you should take more walks like this. Less dead bodies, more clouds and puddles. He looked at her then, that same unreadable expression on his face. I forgot what this felt like. Just breathing, walking without a weapon drawn. Lila offered him her umbrella handle, nudging his arm gently. Then hold this. I'll let you borrow a piece of normal. He took it with a small, grateful huff of laughter, and for a moment, they strolled side by side under the shared cover. Their arms brushed, their steps fell in rhythm. It was easy, impossibly easy, considering the fear still looming at the edges of their lives. When the rain turned heavier, they ran for cover, ducking into a wooden gazebo nestled at the edge of a small park. Lila's hair was damp, curls clinging to her cheeks, and Ethan looked down at her with something warm in his eyes. You're soaked, he said. You too, she replied, laughing as she squeezed the water from her sleeves. Their eyes met. The world, for just a heartbeat, felt like it had shrunk to the size of that gazebo. I used to come to a place like this when I was a kid, she said softly, stepping away from the rain. It always felt safe. Like nothing bad could find me here. Does it feel safe now? He asked. She looked up at him, her expression gentle. Yes, because you're here. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes, raw, unguarded, said more than words ever could. But just as the moment stretched between them, a distant noise shattered the calmer rustle, too loud to be the wind. Ethan turned sharply, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the gazebo. Stay behind me, he said, his voice low, steady. They waited. A squirrel darted from the bushes. Nothing else moved. Still, the spell had broken. Ethan's hand remained near his sidearm as they walked back, slower now, both of them hyper-aware of every sound. But despite the unease, a part of Lila clung to what had just passed, that shared umbrella, the laughter in the rain, the warmth of his gaze, because for one fragile moment, she'd felt something she hadn't dared to feel in weeks, safe, and maybe, just maybe, seen. Chapter 7. Danger at the door. Night settled thick over the safe house, the windows darkened with drawn curtains, the silence deeper than usual. Lila had just finished washing her face, the soft hum of the bathroom fan still buzzing in her ears as she stepped into the hallway in her socks and an oversized sweatshirt. The air felt different, denser somehow. Still, she dismissed the feeling as nerves. She was always on edge these days, Ethan sat on the living room sofa, thumbing through files by the dim light of a floor lamp. He looked up when he saw her approach, his expression softening. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Lila gave a half smile. "I could ask you the same." Before either could say more, a sudden crash shattered the quiet. The sound of glass breaking, sharp and unmistakable. Both froze. Ethan was on his feet instantly, drawing his gun as instinct took over. "Go into the back room. Lock the door. Don't come out unless I call you." Lila's breath caught, her body frozen for a heartbeat too long. But something in Ethan's voice, firm, unshakable, propelled her into motion. She disappeared down the hallway just as Ethan edged toward the sound. The kitchen window had been shattered. Shards of glass glittered on the floor. A rush of cold air poured in, carrying the faint scent of tobacco and damp earth. Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. The back door was ajar. He moved silently, his training kicking in like second nature. A shape darted past the back fence, too fast to catch, but not fast enough to escape the beam of Ethan's flashlight. What he saw chilled him. A figure clad in black, disappearing into the trees, and on the kitchen table, something left behind, a photo. He picked it up slowly, his breath going still. It was of Lila, a little girl in a school uniform, sitting cross-legged on a playground, her smile beaming, her eyes too bright for the grainy quality of the image. The edges were worn, like it had been touched, carried, treasured, or hunted. Ethan swore under his breath and hurried to the hallway, knocking sharply on the bedroom door. "Lila, it's me. It's safe now. You can come out." When she opened the door, her face was pale, her body trembling despite the blanket wrapped around her. He handed her the photo, and her breath hitched when she saw it. That's me," she whispered. "But I've never seen this picture before." Ethan watched her closely. "It means he's been watching you for a long time." Lila sat on the edge of the bed, the photo clutched in her hands, as if holding it would help her understand. "Why me? What does he want?" Ethan knelt in front of her, his voice low but sure. "That's what I'm going to find out. But from now on, you don't leave my sight. Not for anything." Her eyes flicked up to his, no longer just frightened, but desperate for answers. He reached for her hand, something he hadn't done before. "I'll keep you safe. I swear it." Outside, the wind howled, and the trees whispered secrets in the dark. But inside, for the first time, Lila felt the smallest flicker of fire where fear had lived for too long. The fire of resolve, and maybe even the beginning of trust. Chapter 8. Pieces of the past photo stayed on the kitchen table, face up beneath a paperweight Ethan had placed there, not to preserve it, but to keep it from floating off like a bad dream. Lila couldn't stop looking at it. She traced the edges at least a dozen times, her thumb brushing over the faint outline of her childhood self. A girl with scraped knees, bright eyes, and no memory of the photo being taken. Ethan sat across from her, his laptop open, files spread between them. He was focused, eyes scanning school records, news archives, anything that could give context to the image. But Lila, she was quiet, too quiet. Finally, Ethan spoke. "The photo. It looks like it was taken at Rosehill Elementary. That's where you went, right?" She nodded slowly. "I was there until second grade. Then I was pulled out. Something happened, but no one ever talked about it. My parents wouldn't say why. They just moved us across the state." Ethan leaned forward. "Do you remember anything unusual from that time? Anyone who gave you attention? Anyone who made you uncomfortable?" Lila shook her head. "It was so long ago. I only remember shadows, feelings. There was a substitute teacher for a while. He wasn't supposed to be there for long, but he stayed. I remember not liking him. His eyes always felt too heavy, like he saw everything." Ethan's brows furrowed. "Do you remember his name?" "No." She rubbed her temple. "I don't even remember his face clearly, just the way he made me feel." Ethan tapped a few keys, searching the school's archive staff records. When a list of substitute names came up, he scrolled slowly, watching her expression. She paused suddenly, her breath catching. "That one." she whispered, pointing. Jonathan Pierce. I don't know why, but that name. It makes my stomach hurt. Ethan clicked deeper into the file. Pierce had been dismissed quietly after only 6 weeks. No record of why. That's not nothing, Ethan murmured. That's a buried lead. He looked up at Lila, watching as she pulled her cardigan tighter around herself like a shield. You think he's the puppeteer? She asked. I think he might be part of what turned someone into the puppeteer, Ethan said. Or maybe he was the first mask the puppeteer wore. Lila looked down at the photo again. If he's been watching me since I was a child, what does that mean? That this was always coming? Ethan reached across the table, resting a hand gently over hers. It means you survived something once. You're not the helpless little girl in that picture. You're here, alive, stronger than you know. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She straightened slowly. Then I want to help. If I'm a piece of this puzzle, I won't just sit here waiting to be saved. Ethan gave a slight nod, the respect in his gaze unmistakable. Then we dig, together. The past wasn't done speaking, and Lila was finally ready to listen. Chapter 9. A fragile heart awakens. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐢𝐻𝐿 was bruised with the soft lavender of dusk as Ethan stood at the kitchen sink, watching raindrops streak down the window. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that settles after something shifts. Lila hadn't spoken much since they uncovered the truth about Jonathan Pierce. Her strength hadn't faltered, but there was something weighted behind her eyes now. A knowing, a remembering. Ethan turned when he heard her footsteps behind him. She was wrapped in a thick cardigan, hair pulled back in a messy braid, eyes shadowed but steady. Couldn't sleep? He asked gently. She shook her head. You. He gave a faint smile. Not even trying. They sat across from each other on the couch, a half-empty tea mug on the coffee table, the fire Ethan had lit casting a soft glow across the room. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. There was no need anymore. I remembered something, Lila said quietly. After you showed me that photo, I was maybe 7 or 8. I came home one day and told my mom that the man at school kept calling me by a different name. Said I looked like someone he used to know. I thought it was a game, but she panicked, pulled me out the next week. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That wasn't a game. That was obsession. Lila looked down at her hands. I thought I left it all behind, but maybe I just buried it deep enough to forget. He watched her for a long moment. You didn't deserve any of this, Lila. She blinked, her voice catching. Sometimes I wonder if something in me, something broken, made it happen. No, he said, firmly now. What happened to you? What's happening now? It isn't your fault. This man, this predator, he targeted you because you were kind, open, light in the kind of darkness he'll never understand. She looked up at him, eyes glassy with emotion. You really believe that? I do. Something shifted in the space between them. A fragile tenderness, built not on drama or danger, but the slow and painful journey of truly seeing someone. Lila moved a little closer, the edge of her knee brushing his. I've never had someone fight for me before, she whispered. Ethan's voice dropped. I've never let myself care this much. Not since. He stopped himself. But Lila didn't need the full sentence. She felt it. In the way his shoulders had slowly relaxed around her. In the way his eyes lingered when she spoke. In the way his presence no longer felt like protection alone, but companionship. Do you ever wonder, she asked, what we might have been if we weren't thrown together like this? He looked at her, eyes gentle and searching. Maybe we're exactly what we're supposed to be. The only question is, what do we do with it now? Lila's hand moved to his, tentative, trembling, and when he didn't pull away, she leaned in slightly. The kiss that followed wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, quiet. To people scarred by life's cruelty, finding the courage to feel something soft again. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't need to, because for the first time in too long, something inside both of them stirred, a fragile heart awakening. Chapter 10. The puppeteer's puzzled dining table had become a battlefield of memory. Old school records, Faded photographs, scrawled timelines, and a weathered leather diary now lay spread across the surface. Lila sat with a pencil tucked behind her ear, her eyes scanning a page from her childhood journal, the paper trembling faintly in her hand. Ethan stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in concentration. He wasn't used to working a case like this, one where the clues weren't in fingerprints or surveillance footage, but in the hazy corners of memory and the echo of long-buried fears. This journal entry, Lila said, her voice low, it talks about the man with the silver ring. I wrote that he used to sit at the back of the classroom and hum to himself while I colored. I didn't even remember it until I read it again. Ethan leaned closer. Silver ring. That matches the witness statement from the 1999 case. A janitor saw a man loitering near the Rose Hill playground, described a ring with a snake design. Lila shivered. It's like I knew he was watching. Even back then. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You did, and you wrote it down. Even if you didn't understand what it meant, she nodded, her eyes flicking over to a stack of school newsletters. I found something else. Look, she pulled out a class photo, 2nd grade. There she was, front row center, but in the background, barely visible in the window reflection, was a blurry figure. Ethan squinted. That's not a teacher. No, Lila whispered, but he's in 3 of these. Always in the background, always watching. They stared at each other, realization dawning between them. He didn't just pick you at random, Ethan said slowly. You were the one who slipped away. The one that got out before he finished whatever he started. That's why he's back now. He never let go. Lila's voice trembled. So this isn't just about hurting me. It's about finishing what he started. Ethan turned back to the wall, where a hand-drawn map now pinned several crime scene photos and red threads. Look at this pattern. Every time he's re-emerged, it's been in locations that circle around your childhood haunts. It's like he's replaying a memory. Lila stood slowly, walking over to the map. Her finger hovered over a small, unremarkable dot. That park, Willow Bend. I had a birthday party there when I turned 8. I remember a magician came late. I never saw his face because he wore a mask. Ethan's voice dropped. Do you think it was him? Lila nodded. I do now. Ethan grabbed his notebook. We need to get a warrant for the city archives. If he was working under an alias, we may still find payroll or event permits. Lila looked up at him, a spark of determination beneath her fear. We're getting close, aren't we? He met her eyes, that unwavering steadiness returning. We are, and he knows it. For a moment, they stood in the hush between danger and discovery. The air felt electric, charged with something more than just fear or adrenaline. This wasn't just about catching a killer anymore. It was about reclaiming the pieces of a past stolen long ago. And this time, Lila wasn't running. She was facing it. With Ethan right beside her. Chapter 11. The Trappist Seth plan had taken days to craft and a lifetime's worth of fear to confront. Lila sat at the edge of the bed, her palms damp, her breath shallow as she stared at the dress she'd agreed to wear. Simple, soft blue cotton, the kind of dress a nursery teacher would wear on an ordinary day. But today was anything but ordinary. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with a mixture of admiration and unease. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Lila looked up. Yes, I do. He stepped into the room. Lila, this is bait. It's dangerous. If anything goes wrong, I won't live my life hiding in corners, she said, voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. He's been haunting me since I was a child. If I let you face him alone, then I'm still the scared girl in that photo, and I'm not her anymore. Ethan took a breath, conflicted. He hated the thought of using her, hated the way the plan relied on her vulnerability, on her walking back into the web the puppeteer had spun long ago. But he also knew she was right. The trap had been designed meticulously. Lila would return to Willow Bend Park, where she had once celebrated her 8th birthday. She would walk alone, just as she had then, following the same trail, wearing the same soft colors. Hidden officers and surveillance would surround the area. But Ethan would be closest, a whisper away, armed, invisible, watching every move. Lila fastened the necklace she hadn't worn in years, a tiny silver heart on a delicate chain, a piece of her mother's, passed down when Lila turned 10. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, surprised to see someone strong looking back. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You're brave." She turned to him, her gaze searching. "I'm terrified." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. Bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about standing up anyway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she reached out, her fingers grazing his. "Promise me you won't let him touch me." His eyes darkened with something fierce and unwavering. "I swear it." An hour later, the sun dipped low as Lila stepped into the clearing. The same worn bench beneath the willow tree waiting like a relic of her past. A child's birthday balloon fluttered nearby, a subtle prop, planted for atmosphere. She sat waited somewhere in the shadows. Ethan gripped his radio, tracking her every breath. Lila's hands curled into her lap. Her heart thudded, a steady drumbeat of fear and determination. This wasn't just a trap for a killer. It was a reckoning, and she was ready. Chapter 12. Faced if a sea wind shifted. It wasn't loud, just a subtle rustle through the trees, the kind that wouldn't register to the untrained ear. But Ethan heard it. He was perched behind a line of hedges, eyes trained through binoculars, every muscle in his body tense. His earpiece crackled as the other officers checked in, but his focus was solely on her. Lila sat still on the park bench beneath the willow tree, hands folded calmly in her lap. To a passerby, she looked serene, but Ethan knew the truth. Her heart was pounding. He could feel it from across the clearing. Then he saw him, a figure emerging from the path, tall, slow-moving, dressed in nondescript clothes, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. No one else in the park. Lila didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward, just as they had practiced. Ethan's hands slid to his gun. The man approached, and then he spoke. "You wore the same color," the voice said, quiet and flat. "You remember more than you let on." Lila turned her head slowly, her voice trembling only slightly. "I remembered the fear. You made sure of that." The man sat beside her, as if they were old friends meeting after years apart. "I taught you the truth early," he whispered. "The world isn't kind, but you were kind. Too kind. That's why I watched you." Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He needed a clean shot, a clear moment. But Lila had insisted on trying. She needed to face him. She needed to reclaim herself. "I was a child," she said. Louder now. "You stole my safety, my sleep, my memories, but not anymore." The puppeteer tilted his head. "You were always special, Lila, not like the others. I saved you." "No," she said, standing now, her voice ringing out. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to pretend this was anything but sickness." He stood too fast, his hand twitching toward something in his jacket. In an instant, Ethan was out from cover. "Drop it," he shouted, gun raised, feet thundering across the ground. Lila's breath caught as the puppeteer froze, startled not by the weapon, but by Ethan's voice. "I said drop it." The man turned, slow and calculated, but in that moment of hesitation, it was over. Officers swarmed the clearing from every direction. The puppeteer lunged, reaching for Lila, but Ethan was faster, grabbing him, slamming him to the ground with a force fueled by years of guilt and rage. Handcuffs clicked. Lila stumbled back, eyes wide, chest heaving, and then Ethan was beside her, hands on her shoulders, grounding her. "It's over," he said, breathless. "You did it." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but release. After all these years, the shadow was gone. She had looked him in the eye, spoken, fought, survived. She collapsed into Ethan's arms, clinging to him if he were the only solid thing in the world. And maybe he was in that park, beneath the willow tree, where her innocence had once been stolen. Lila had taken her power back, and Ethan had kept his promise. Chapter 13. After the storm, a hospital room was quiet, bathed in soft morning light. A vase of sunflowers sat on the windowsill. A nurse's kind gesture. Lila lay propped up in the bed, and four in her arm, and a blanket tucked around her legs. Her hair was pulled back, her skin pale but calm. For the first time in days, she looked like someone at rest. Ethan stood near the door, hands in his pockets, unsure if he should move closer. He hadn't slept much since the arrest. His knuckles were still bruised from the scuffle, and his mind hadn't stopped replaying that moment when Lila had faced the man who haunted her. And when she noticed him, her lips curved into a soft smile. "Hey," he relaxed, just a little. "Hey, you look awful," she said with a weak laugh. He stepped closer. "You look like someone who just stared down a serial killer and lived to tell the tale. I feel like someone who finally exhaled after holding her breath for 20 years. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now, not born from fear, but from something deeper, something peaceful. "They're transferring him to federal custody this afternoon," Ethan said. "He's not going anywhere." Lila nodded slowly. "Does it ever feel real after something like this?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "Sometimes. Mostly. It feels like there's always something else waiting in the shadows. But not this time," she said, her voice stronger now. "He was my shadow. And he's gone." She reached for his hand. He let her take it. "I wouldn't have made it without you," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, really looked. The strength in her gaze, the warmth returning to her smile. "I think you would have. I just got to witness it." A tear slid down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from fear or grief. It was release. "I don't want to go back to being the woman I was before this," she said. "I want to move forward, with the scars, with the strength, and with someone," he said carefully, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. She looked at him, eyes searching, vulnerable but open. "With you." He hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "If you'll let me." "I already have." Their fingers laced together in the stillness of the hospital room, a fragile promise born from the wreckage. Not flashy, not loud, just steady, outside. The sun climbed a little higher, chasing away what was left of the night. After the storm, they were still standing, together. Chapter 14. Healing in small moments. Soft hum of children's voices drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of finger paint and apple slices. Lila stood at the front of her newly reopened classroom, her hands dusted with red glitter, a quiet smile curving her lips as she watched her students gather around the reading rug. It had been 3 weeks since she left the hospital. 3 weeks of therapy sessions, whispered check-ins, and deep, grounding breaths. But today felt different. Today felt like a return, not to who she was before, but to the life she had rebuilt, stronger and wiser. She knelt beside a little girl struggling with her shoelaces. "Here, sweetheart, let's do it together," she murmured, guiding the tiny fingers through the loops with patient grace. The world still carried scars, both hers and Ethan's, but those scars had become part of the fabric of their days, stitched in quietly with laughter and shared looks and moments that didn't need to be spoken aloud. That afternoon, as the final bell rang and the last of the children waved their goodbyes, Lila did the classroom, humming softly under her breath. She didn't jump when the door creaked open behind her. She knew that sound now. Ethan stepped in, dressed casually in jeans and a navy jacket, a takeout coffee in each hand. "You looked like someone who needed caffeine and something sweeter than juice boxes." She turned, a warm smile lighting her face. "You always know I try." He walked toward her, offering the cup, and she took it with a grateful nod. There was still a gentleness in the way he looked at her, but it wasn't laced with pity anymore. It was admiration, love, respect. "I keep thinking," he said, "about how this classroom was where it all started, where he left that message, and now it's just a classroom again." Lila glanced around. "That's the victory, isn't it? That fear doesn't get to keep this place." He nodded, his eyes lingering on the way she stood a little taller now. "You've come back to life, I think," she said. "I'm finally living it." They sat together on the edge of one of the tiny student desks, sipping their coffee in the fading light of late afternoon. No sirens, no shadows, just the kind of quiet that feels earned. Do you ever wonder, Lila asked softly, what our lives would have looked like if none of this had happened? Ethan tilted his head. Sometimes. But then I remember. It's because of all this that I found you. She reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers, and there, in the soft hush of her classroom, surrounded by crayon drawings, sticky chairs, and the faint echo of laughter, healing happened, not in grand declarations or dramatic finales, but in small, steady moments like this, moments that whispered, "We made it." Chapter 15. To savor Heart spring had arrived in full bloom, brushing the city with warmth and color. Willow Bend Park, once a backdrop of fear and memory, now shimmered with new life. Children laughing near the pond, cherry blossoms drifting like pink snow, and the scent of wildflowers carried on the breeze. Ethan stood near the old gazebo, watching as Lila approached along the gravel path, her sundress swaying softly, a woven basket in one hand. Her hair was loose, catching sunlight like strands of gold. When she saw him, her face lit up with that familiar, quiet smile, the one that had first chipped away at his walls. "You're early," she said, setting the basket down beside the bench. "I didn't want to miss a minute." They sat together, side by side, just like they had during the rainstorm months ago. But this time, there was no tension in the air, no shadows lurking, just the soft hum of life moving forward. "I haven't been back here since that day," Lila murmured. "It feels different." He glanced at her. "That's because you're different." She looked at him, her expression tender. "We both are." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, his hand trembling ever so slightly as he pulled out a small velvet box. Lila's breath caught. "I used to think I wasn't built for anything soft," he said. "That love was something for other people. People who hadn't seen what I've seen, done what I've done." Her eyes shone as he spoke, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. "But then I met you," he continued, "and you taught me that even the hardest hearts can be softened. That love isn't about being unbreakable. It's about choosing someone, over and over, even when it's hard." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, simple, elegant, with a small heart-shaped diamond nestled in a gold band. "Nothing flashy, just honest. Lila Hart," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I've spent my life trying to save others. But when I met you, I finally saved myself. Will you marry me?" Lila pressed a hand to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from fear, not from pain, but from joy, healing, wholeness. She nodded, her voice a whisper. "You already saved my heart." "Ethan, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she leaned forward, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of hope and rain and something brand new. Around them, life continued, children played, flowers bloomed, and the park swayed gently with laughter. And in that quiet little corner beneath the old gazebo, two hearts, once fractured by fear, beat as one.